guys, and welcome back to another SpaceX PLR episode. Today we have a very special episode, so a very special guest, and her name is Michaela Musilova. So a little bit about her. I mean, it's not a little bit, there's a lot of different things to mention, and today's show is going to be all about, again, space missions, space, upcoming, future missions, and a lot of different things. So make sure to keep watching this episode. It's going to be really awesome. So again, about Michaela. So she's Dr. Michaela Musilova. She's an astrobiologist and the director of the High Seas Analog Space Station. So Michaela studied and conducted research at the University of Bristol, University College London. So California Institute of Technology, Chiba University, International Space University, and others. So she worked for NASA, University of London Observatory, Canada, France, Hawaii Telescope, and was commander of over 20 simulated missions to the Moon and Mars. She's also visiting professor at the Slovak University of Technology, vice chair of the Slovak Organisation for Space Activities, so adjunct faculty at ISU and senior research advisor for Mission Control Space Services Incorporated. But hold on, there's more. So Michaela has received numerous prizes and research grants, including the Emerging Space Leaders Grant for the International Astronautical Federation, Women in Aerospace Europe Young Professional Awards, and she was selected as one of the most promising 30 under 30 by Forbes Slovakia. She's also actively involved in the Duke of Edinburgh International Award as a patron of the program in Slovakia and an emerging leader representative for Europe, Mediterranean and Arab states. So furthermore, Michaela regularly performs a variety of other outreach activities, which includes teaching, presenting, working with media, and being an advisory board of a STEM punks educational programs. And of course, there are more because there's all these social media links that you should go and follow Michaela, which is going to be LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and many more is going to be included in the show notes. So make sure to get in contact with this person and ask her questions if we're not going to be able to cover everything today. So again, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the great introduction. Aloha, everyone, from Hawaii / from the moon. I'm actually on a simulated lunar mission right now inside the High Seas habitat. Just so you see behind me, it's a lab, part of the High Seas station. My crew members are the other part of the habitat, so a little bit of privacy here. I apologize in advance if my connection is going to be a bit jumpy. There's a few second delay between Moon and Earth, so it might be a bit jumpy, but hopefully you'll be able to hear me okay.
Nice. So it's done like that on purpose? So it will be a delay or?
Yes, that's right, yeah. So with Mars simulations, it's a 20-minute delay each way, so that even in an emergency situation, it would take at least 40 minutes for people on the Martian base to receive help from the equivalent of NASA Houston, so basically mission control. So crews on Martian missions, analog Mars missions, and one day on real Mars have to be very autonomous with regards to Earth. Whereas on the moon, because it's so much closer, there's only a 2-second delay, so about 3 and something seconds each way. So it's actually pretty easy to communicate with Earth, but it means that people on lunar missions are much more dependent on Earth. Mission Control Center are much more watched by people in mission control, and so they're much less independent and can be less free to do what they want.
Got it. So that's very interesting. So a few seconds delay wouldn't kill anybody, I guess. Hopefully.
No, actually, I could save lives, but then it's almost like being on the International Space Station, where you're constantly watched by people in mission control centers all around the planet, and you have to stick to a certain schedule and so on and so forth. Whereas on Mars, because they can't control you that much, it's very much up to the crews to take care of their schedule, make sure they're getting all their work done on time, but they're not really supervised that much as the, say, lunar crews or ISS crews.
Got it. So again, before we're gonna dive into your personal background, because I would love to know more again about you and your personal story. How did you get involved with all these different organizations and projects? And I mean, it's really awesome. And maybe you can inspire other people at the same time too. So the question would be, again, having those type of delays. So again, now we're talking about the simulation. You mentioned it's moon simulation. So are we talking about, again, creating a moon base? And do you think those again, few second delays, because I had a few people who are coming from kind of medical backgrounds, and we had the similar, conversation, but we couldn't come up to the answer. So would you think that having some sort of a probably robotic, let's say, surgery on the moon with those few seconds of delay, it could be could happen as a worst case scenario?
Yes, I mean, so-called telesurgery has also been tested for Mars simulations, where it would basically, the crews would have this kind of robotic assistant available with configurations for different types of surgery and other medical issues. And so that, because they can't communicate with Earth so much, they would have to use this robot to help guide them or maybe do some of the surgery for them. With the moon, because of it's just a couple of seconds delay, there could actually be a doctor or a surgeon on call and be guiding the crew, and just you have to be just patient for those little glitches in communication. But it would be like any kind of telesurgery on Earth where a doctor has to guide someone virtually like this to do something. And I think it's going to be very important that such procedures are put in place, because you can only send so many people to space, and you're not going to be able to send a heart surgeon and a brain surgeon and so on and so forth. It's going to have to be maybe one or two doctors on a smaller mission that are kind of general specialists, can have a good general overview of the human body and different procedures, but they're not going to be able to specialize in many things, and so they're going to need guidance from Earth, and that's where telesurgeries and things like that are going to be very important.
And what do you guys do as a team to to mitigate those risks when it comes to having those injuries?
We have a number of procedures in place, different safety ones, for instance. So, basic rules of what to do, what not to do in the habitat. We also put in place different measures to make sure there wouldn't be a risk of fire. So we don't have any kind of gas in the habitat that could potentially set itself on fire or with a spark or something. Or we don't have anything that releases carbon monoxide that could be dangerous to the crew. All projects, before crew members bring them on mission, have to be vetted by me first to check that there's no risk involved for crew members. And if there is a riskier experiment that needs to be performed, for instance, we need to make sure all the safety precautions are put in place. So perhaps gas mask or something when you have to be dealing with something that could be dangerous for the lungs. And if it's something like, you need a rock hammer to smash something, again, make sure you have safety goggles and all those things. So first things first is just to follow the safety procedures, do all the preventative measures. And then if something were to happen, then we actually, so just right here, slide, you see that's a medical kit just there. So we have that on hand with different types of items they could happen here. There's always at least one medically trained personnel on the crew. We also have an on-call doctor who can help us if the medical officer in the crew can't help out with that particular problem or something. And then, of course, as the situation, if it were to be more serious, we would have to break simulation to, evacuate someone to the hospital or something like that if it were something very serious. So we have different procedures in place for different scenarios, but the number one thing is just to be careful and not take any risks. So even when we go outside on EVA, so the spacewalks, we have to follow particular rules. A mission under the habitat communicator, or as we call them, HABCOM, the person in the habitat that communicates with the EVA crew. They have to know exactly where they're going, what their plan is, things like that, so that if anything were to happen, we will be able to find them and help.
Got it. So can you talk about a little bit more, as we are in the subject right now, talking about the high seas? Can you give us again a rough number, like how long, how many days you're going to be, let's say, on the station right now, and what will be kind of the end goal of the mission?
Okay, so actually, this mission is coming to an end. I think today is day 13. I lose track on the moon. We don't have weekdays, so everything becomes a blur. But this is a 2-week mission, and so we're coming to an end now on Friday this week, December 18th. We're finishing up this mission. And all of the recent missions have been 2-week simulated missions because of the pandemic. So it's almost like a safety precaution, even though every crew member has to take a COVID test before they get those are the regulations. And we do everything possible to make sure no one would get sick. There's always a risk. So that's why a 2-week mission is almost like our own quarantine, and we don't want to do longer missions under these circumstances. So yes, a 2-week simulated moon mission. The crew, we're called the Sensoria M3 mission. It's part of a Sensoria series of missions that are particularly aiming to help people in minorities have access to these simulated missions and have women in leadership. So all of these Sensoria missions are led by a female commander, in this case it's myself, and a majority female crew. So this particular crew were 4 women and 2 men. And in terms of the goals, every single crew member brought their own research project to do on the mission, and we have some kind of overall goals. So for instance, my main project is the collaboration with NASA Goddard. We're exploring a lava tube, so lava cave close to the habitat, where there's some interesting microbial life forms in there, and we're trying to understand how they got there, how they survive, what their different kind of geochemical cycles are, because we think that something similar could live on Mars. And so we're trying to understand it here on Earth first to see if we could potentially find similar life forms on Mars. So that's kind of the main part of the mission, is for us to help with this project, but then each person brought some of their own projects. Some are also related to astrobiology. Others are to do with a mini greenhouse we have here in the habitat. There's an astrophotographer on the crew that's doing some amazing photography on our moon night EVA, so moonwalks at night. And yeah, some people have been writing a book. So it's a very diverse combination of different research projects.
Mhm. Got it. So again, like I had similar, like I have one of the guests, Charlotte Powles. So she talked about again, ice mission. I think it's called Chill Ice Mission. It's basically 2021 for the next year, and she talked about those lava tubes as well. So now we're talking. Right now, you're in Hawaii. So why particular Hawaii? Because of the terrain, or what other kind of key points for this mission that is exactly happening in Hawaii right now?
Yeah, so this habitat, the high sea station, was built in this particular location because it's actually on the volcano Mauna Loa, approximately 2,500 meters in altitude. And at this altitude, there's almost no vegetation around us. All around us are just lava fields, so not liquid lava right now, but it used to be. And these amazing flows have created these different lava tunnels and other geological formations, which we can find on both the moon and Mars. So this terrain, apart looking very alien without the vegetation and the lava flows, it actually is relevant for scientific research for both the moon and Mars. So as I mentioned, on Mars, we could potentially find similar life forms in the lava tubes. On the moon, we could actually live in these lava caves. And so that's why we have space architects that also come on mission and study these lava tubes as potential places where we could build habitats, not on the surface of the moon, but underground. Geologists come here to do research relevant for both the moon and Mars. And for example, we do a lot of technology testing, so-called in situ resource utilization, ISRU. So using the local resources on the moon and Mars to extract water from the soil, to build bricks using the regolith and things like that. And we can test all of this here because the terrain around us is very relevant.
Okay, so the question that I want to ask, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to ask that question, because most of the time when I'm having a conversation with people like yourself, we come to the conclusion that at the same time, all these missions that we're looking forward to, let's say just flying and colonizing Mars, or going and creating a moon base, and now people looking towards, Artemis missions and things like that. It seems like it's not the technology who is behind. It seems like we as people and making good decisions as teammates, and, you know, having those problems, one is flipping out for whatever reason, loses his mind, or things like that happen. So personally, what you have seen so far that kind of, you know, of course, without calling the names, you know, that could be kind of, you know, problematic when it comes to, let's say, creating those moon bases or colonization of Mars, and what type of like situations we should expect between people in those, you know, environments.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You know, it's an interesting combination. On one hand, if we send humans, for instance, to Mars, we are going to be so much more efficient at looking for life, at, you know, building settlements, all those things, exploring the planet, because humans are just so much faster than robots. Robots move sometimes centimeters a day, and the analyses on Earth take forever. Whereas a trained geologist, astrobiologist, you could find information just by looking at it or analyzing it on the spot. So it'd be much better to send humans, but with the humans, there comes risks. And so from my experience, it really depends on the composition of the crew. When I put together crews, on purpose, I like to choose a crew with varied experience. So for instance, younger people with less experience in the field or on these missions or in research, while that may be a little bit of a handicap that they don't have as much experience as others, but they bring enthusiasm, they bring this other energy, this curiosity, which I think people, as they age, generally speaking, you kind of, you know, you become much more careful. You don't want to risk things, and you become a bit more restrained in terms of the research you want to do or the exploration you want to do. So a young person will bring that enthusiasm, that energy, but they also need to be moderated, because sometimes that enthusiasm can be too much and they may take risks that are too hazardous for them or the rest of the crew. So that's why if I bring in a very young crew member, I want to make sure there's someone experienced to kind of balance it out. And generally I look for crews that are majority experienced, and with maybe one or two crew members that are less so. And when I say experienced, I mean people that have at least gone through some kind of stressful, more extreme situations. So perhaps working in a big team, international teams ideally, where you have to deal with people of different cultures, differences of opinion. But also, you know, ideally, if you spend some time outdoors, at least camping, hiking, something. I joke that even being a Girl Scout, Boy Scout will give you an advantage, because you have to, you know, work outdoors, work in teams, think out of the box. And so those experiences show me that these people can handle situations that are outside of normal people's comfort zone. So not just working in an office, you know, kind of more standard everyday life. And of course, ideally, it would be best if they have done some expeditions or already done a simulated mission before. So I always try and mix the crews, so there's this experience level that's different. I like to have, we usually need at least one or two engineers on crews, because we have to keep ourselves alive here, and our life support systems are dependent on engineers kind of maintaining them, watching over them. Scientists obviously to come and do research, but I like to give at least one position in the crew to someone who's very different. So an artist, a journalist, photographer, something like that, because again, that diversity helps increase the creativity of the crew. I found that crews that are mostly scientists or mostly engineers, they tend to, again, all kind of think in a similar way, and, you know, may not think outside of the box as much when necessary, if emergency situation comes up or things like that. So diversity seems to be key from my experience. You know, gender definitely, in my eyes, plays no role. Yeah, I've seen extremely talented men, women, and so on. So I like to mix the crews, but honestly, when I get an application, I don't ask what the person's gender is or anything like that. I look at what, you know, what they can bring to the mission from their experience.
Exactly. So again, when we're talking about those, you know, moments of colonizing Mars and creating moon base, is it exactly what the people? I mean, do we have people just like yourself who going through analog missions, just like high seas, who are preparing for those scenarios of flying and staying, you know, for long, you know, periods of time? Or those people that again are astronauts who are, you know, like doing the research right now on ISS? Like, who's getting ready for those, you know, colonization and stepping on, you know, on Mars moments?
settling on Mars is still so far away that things may change. Even, you know, Artemis missions, they're likely going to be just short missions, you know, the first new batch of people going to the moon, the first women on the moon, and so on. I mean, it's all great, but they hopefully will lay the foundation for people to come back and actually build settlements that are going to be sustainable and permanent on the moon. And from there, we can then build on to on Mars. But all that is pretty far away. But I would say from you know, what I've experienced myself on missions, the ideal crew members for such missions will be people who have lots of experience working under stressful situations. So like during these missions or expeditions or other, you know, difficult environments, for example, emergency responders and things like that. Team working skills are extremely important for obvious reasons. You know, only working together can we get everything to work here, and then for the crew to get along and do their research and be successful in their mission. Another thing I found is communication. You know, there's certain types of people that don't like to talk openly about their feelings or you know, what's going on in their personal life or so on. The problem is, if people hold feelings in during a mission, it can lead to problems later on, where suddenly those negative feelings are going to accumulate and they're going to accidentally, you know, snap at someone or do something unexpected, and that causes a lot of issues. And I've actually had have experience with some crew members that were not very good at communicating with others, and then tensions rose, and actually there ended up being a fight on a mission. And you know, it's such a small space, you can hear and see everything, there's no escape. So a kind of discussion like that is very difficult for the entire crew. So people need to learn to communicate better, talk more openly about, you know, what bothers them, what's going on. Tell people, you know, I just need some alone time. Just, you know, please leave me alone for a couple of hours. I'm okay. But maybe some people actually they really need a hug, and they just need to be able to, you know, go ask for it. So I generally look for crew members that clearly are better at communicating from their experience, because the ones that hold it in, though they may be very skilled scientists or engineers, they could actually become problematic to a mission. And then probably the most important thing is empathy, is really trying to understand what the other people are going through. Everyone is dealing with stressful situations differently, and so you can't just assume that everyone thinks the same as you. So again, people who can kind of demonstrate that they're not closed-minded, they can kind of try to understand other people and find compromises. That's vital.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So I mean, it makes a lot of sense, because we live in a times right now when it feels like we're always on a high road and we're racing 200 miles an hour, you know, because of what technology is doing, you know, with the social media and all the news that's coming to us every single day in mass amounts. And again, we just this kind of, you know, confused people. We're just walking around and we're very emotional at the same time, you know. So I think, again, social media and this kind of digital age exposes us and makes us, you know, more emotional to what's happening around us. And of course, when we're emotional, those situations happen, especially when we're talking about, you know, in a kind of closed, you know, stage just like this, you know, when it's closed environment, you're talking with just like 5, 6, 10 people, and, you know, you're rubbing elbows. So those like tense moments will happen. So is there any kind of preparation, again, if we're going to be talking into the future, let's say for another 1,000, 10,000 people, like how as people, as you know, we should prepare for those moments of colonizing other planets. If we want to take, let's say, you know, 100,000 people to Mars, is there some sort of a pattern that we should do? Should we do like meditation, read some books that get more like emotional stable before we get ready for these moments?
I think there's going to have to be a lot of procedures, different mixture of things. So first of all, people have to learn to work in teams. And I don't mean necessarily just doing like, you know, standard teamwork exercises, which, you know, a lot of people who work in companies are probably very tired of at this point. But it's more just, you know, having people go through these simulated missions. And what I always try to do as a commander of such a mission is to make us go from being a team of colleagues, of scientists, engineers, artists, and so on, to become a space family. If you can kind of make this transition to being a family rather than just colleagues, that will change, because you're suddenly, suddenly it's your brother, sister, whatever, in a, of course, an unrelated way, but you understand them much more. You know what makes them laugh. You know if they're probably sad and need some help. And if we can kind of teach people to find this empathy and to build these bonds that are almost family-like amongst themselves, that's going to be very important. And to do that, people have to go for similar experiences. They don't necessarily have to go on analog missions, though. If we want to settle on the moon or Mars, they really should go through a lot of analog missions in preparation. But it's really about, teaching them to get along with other people. And then, like you mentioned, even meditation, things like that, that's kind of looking at oneself. So the introspection is very important to understand, what are your flaws? What can you do to, make the situation better? What can you improve? So it needs to be a combination of, learning to work with others better, being more empathetic, and working on yourself, admitting your mistakes, and learning to communicate better. And that's going to have to be a combination of team exercises and these kind of personal exercises guided by professionals and examined by psychologists. The only caveat there with the psychologists is some of my experiences working with a psychologist that look at analog missions is that many times they have never gone on a mission themselves, so they're only assuming things from an external perspective from Earth, and so they just don't understand. They may give you advice, they may do their little analyses and everything, but many times it's not going to be very accurate because they just don't understand what the members are going through. So I would say any specialists that are going to be helping train people need to first go for the training themselves, and only then will they be able to really help people and provide accurate advice.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that people should already do this. I mean, I think we're smart enough to kind of start understanding that the ways we're thinking right now, it's not going to work. I mean, it's not a movie, about us going and traveling and staying in Mars, and somebody was on a planet, sitting there comfortably on their, on their chair with the gravity and with all the air around us, and they will be like, oh, just go and do this. That's going to work. Because it's very hard to make those decisions, as I said, if you never experience those environments. And again, and that's why I think analog missions are so great to kind of understand. And again, those people should be involved as well. You mentioned who the ones who are going to be checking the kind of psychological side of the human beings, the way they're going to operate. Because I think it's a very huge thing that people should look and pay a lot of attention. Again, it's not a technology that I'm worried about, at least personally. So, but
yeah, just unfortunately we're not quite at that stage yet. I really hope people will learn their lesson, but I can tell you from experience, we're still far away from
that. Okay, but there's hope. There's hope, right?
There's always.
Okay, that's good to hear. So what about, again, high seas, again, mission? Can you talk about this analog mission, how people can get involved with that? I mean, do you have some sort of degree? How's the process go? Can anybody start this, analog mission?
I've had several open calls for applications, and actually I still have some that get in touch with me, ideally by email, but you can also contact me for social media and I will give you my email address. So what I look for when people apply to take part in a mission is, again, the relevant experience I mentioned, just to prove to me that you have worked in teams before under stressful conditions. And that is because I need to be sure that the people that come here are going to be able to handle it. I've also had, people who had experience and, they thought they could handle it, but it was just, it's a very small environment. It's a lot of isolation you have to go through. If you don't, really click with the other crew members, a lot of emotions can be heightened. So, that relevant experience is very important. And then the other thing that's very important for me is to see what the crew member wants to bring to the mission. There unfortunately are a lot of people out there that just want to take part in a mission just to put that on their CV and to take pictures in simulated spacesuits, and we don't want those people on missions. They're just being selfish and doing it for themselves. We want people that want to contribute to space exploration, that they're going to bring a research project that is going to be useful, to the mission, but also to help humans be able to go to the moon and Mars one day. So the research projects that people come up with, I look at them really closely, and I will ask a lot of questions to make sure that it's something valid and useful and also safe, as I mentioned before. We can't just bring any kind of experiment on missions. And then taking part in these missions is also very physically demanding. Because the station is at higher altitude, you have to wear these analog spacesuits. It's very difficult to go outside and do research. So, I warn people that if they want to take part in a mission, even though they might not be very fit when they apply, they need to get ready. They need to start training before coming here, because they will not be able to take part in EVAs or the moonwalks or Mars walks if they are not physically fit enough.
Exactly. So, okay. So for the people who are looking to do this just for the selfie, get in contact with me. I'm going to send you a green screen and you're going to feel like you're there.
Exactly.
Awesome. So what about, again, other projects that you got involved with? I mean, there's a lot to cover, and I don't know if, again, we're going to have time for this today. So I would love for you to come back another time and maybe go in, a different direction. But can you talk about how did you get involved with all these projects in the first place, where your passion is coming from? And, what would you say for the people who are coming, to this type of interview for the first time, and, how people can get involved with these type of projects as well?
For me, my passion started actually when I was 7 years old. It started with passion for science. At first, I discovered a book about volcanoes, and that set the first spark in my brain. And a year later, when I was about 8 years old, I was browsing from an encyclopedia, and I found a section about planets, Jupiter and Saturn. And once I realized they have so many moons and rings and all those things, it just made me be so fascinated, and I just wanted to know more. I wanted to know if there are aliens out there, and I started writing sci-fi novels when I was 10 years old, and that kind of just followed me through the years. However, it wasn't an easy path. My parents are more from a social sciences background, so they could not really support these passions. They couldn't support me financially either. So I knew that if I wanted to pursue my dream of doing this kind of research, and actually my big dream was to become an astronaut, and still is, they just wouldn't be able to help me. So I had to just go on my own. And so when I was 15 years old, I decided to make this decision. It was a very hard one, but I knew that, working in something that you're passionate about, will just make you so much happier and feel like you're living a full life. So I got multiple jobs while I was in high school to start preparing to be able to fund my university studies. And eventually I was able to get into University College London, which had a planetary science program, so geology and astrophysics. My goal was to get to astrobiology, but that did not exist at the time. You couldn't just study that degree. So I just knew I had to pave my own path. And thanks to my study exam results at my high school, I was able to get into UCL on a scholarship, but it was not enough to fund my entire studies. So I actually had to have 3 jobs while doing my university degree. And it was very difficult because sometimes for the astrophysics part, I would be working at the University of London Observatory until 4 in the morning. And then I would have lectures already at 8 in the morning, and I would have to be working in between all of that. So it was a very difficult time, but it was worth it. I tried very hard. I got a number of scholarships. Even charities helped me because they saw my passion for what I do. And I was able to get a scholarship worth $50,000 to go to Caltech later during my studies, and Caltech in the US. And it was there that I was given the option of, they basically told me I could study whatever I want, because at the time Caltech was considered the #1 university in the world, at least in my field of expertise. And so I was finally able to add the biology element into my studies. So I did microbiology, environmental science, and so on. And that's when I could really start establishing myself as an astrobiologist. And during my studies at Caltech, I found out that nearby there's a NASA Jet Propulsion Lab, a JPL, and that there was a researcher who was doing astrobiology research. I was like, oh, I really want to get involved with this person. So I got in touch, and I suggested different types of projects that I would love to work with him on. His name is Dr. Adrian Ponce. But he told me that unfortunately he can't have international students work at JPL because it's just NASA regulation. But I didn't give up, and I was like, oh, why could we try something else, something different? And I came up with all sorts of possible solutions, and eventually said, oh, well, actually, maybe we could apply for a grant for you to come as a visiting researcher. And eventually, after several months of working hard on that, we were able to get this permit and this grant. And so I was able to work at NASA JPL on astrobiology research, which was like a dream come true. And that made me specialize in extremophiles, so life forms that live in extreme environments. And by understanding the limits of life on Earth, we can try and see if similar extreme life forms could exist on other planets, for instance, Mars. And so my master's project and later my PhD was focusing on these extreme life forms. I ended up doing research in the Arctic, in Greenland, Svalbard, also for a Royal Society grant. I did some work in Japan. So really kind of broadened my field, but it was towards the end of my PhD in 2014, there was a selection for the first British crew to take part in a Mars analog mission in Utah at the Mars Desert Research Station. And it was, again, I told myself, well, I'm not British, I'm originally from Slovakia, but I was doing my PhD in the UK at the time, so maybe, it's worth a try to apply. And so I applied, they accepted me as a crew member, but they also accepted 3 of my research projects to perform during this mission. And it was a very successful mission in terms of the research we did, and an amazing experience for me. And that's really how I kind of got my foot in the door in these analog missions. And afterwards, I just realized this is something I want to be involved with, that while doing research on extremophiles is definitely very interesting, I want to keep on being involved in the space sector. And there's a lot more detail there, but basically after that, I also decided I wanted to go back home to Slovakia to help move our space sector forward, because we're still not part of the European Space Agency, but at the time in 2015, we were not even collaborating with ESA. And so I came back home, and together with the Slovak Organisation for Space Activity, SOSA, we helped convince the government to sign a cooperation treaty with ESA. And now we will, if all goes according to plan, become an associate member of ESA, and hopefully maybe 5-7 years we'll become a full member. And so during my time in Slovakia, I was elected as chair of SOSA. We launched the first Slovakian satellite, built suborbital rockets, and I started teaching astrobiology as a professor at the Slovak University of Technology. And so all that was going really great. But then there was a selection to take part in an analog mission here in Hawaii. It was an 8-month NASA-funded mission. And again, it just reminded me, oh, that was where my passions lie, and I'm still hoping to become an astronaut one day. Why not give that a try? So I applied, I got selected, and I came to Hawaii to be part of this NASA mission. But a number of things happened. The mission didn't end up lasting for 8 months as we originally hoped. But the silver lining of it was that I eventually was made director of high seas. And almost 3 years later, now I have almost 30 missions under my belt as commander of both Moon and Mars missions. So that's, I would say, the quick summary of my experience. But basically for people to get involved in these analog missions, the main thing is, like I mentioned before, is passion for what you want to do, that you actually want to help humans get to the Moon and Mars. So work on research that is relevant to that. It's not just, again, about taking a picture in a spacesuit, but you really want to have to make a contribution and then just help out. Many times just volunteering will help you get foot in the door. I have a lot of volunteers that help at mission control during these missions, and then later you can become Capcom, so the main person communicating with the analog astronauts. And with enough experience, you can come and apply to be a crew member here as well.
Got it. Awesome. So again, for the people who are listening, do you need to have some sort of a degree? Do you need to have PhD? And do you believe that the first people, again, those, I mean, if we're going to be talking about the 1,000 people, 10,000 people, those people should be scientists, or we need any day type regular people who are having 9-to-5 jobs. Do we need those people to get involved as well, or it should be just scientists like people also?
Honestly, no, I definitely think it should not be only scientists. Even here on mission, so it depends on the type of missions. Some missions we collaborate with certain organizations like NASA, where they do require a bachelor's and 5 years of experience after your bachelor's degree. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a master's or a PhD, but enough experience. For me, I generally do like people to have at least a bachelor's, but that's when they come and do scientific research. I've also had people that don't have any higher degree apart high school level, but they have a lot of experience in something that can contribute to a mission, and that's why I choose them to come here. We've had artists and photographers and people like that, again, who don't have scientific degrees, but they bring other elements to the mission, particularly creativity and this other perspective on things. So no, it really goes back to what I said before, that I prefer diversity. A more diverse crews with a range of experience will bring so much more to mission than a mission of just scientists, just engineers, who will all be thinking a similar way. And it might not be a bad way, but they're not going to be very creative. They might have issues thinking outside of the box. And because they're all kind of similar, while they may get along in some ways, they may, for example, all be introverts, and then they're going to have big issues communicating or getting along. So actually diverse crews where you have people different opinions, but most of them are empathetic or know how to work well as a team, they can help deal with people who may struggle with that, but then who may bring, say, the scientific or engineering element.
Got it. So again, you having an experience in JPL, I have to ask you, what was their experience like? Can you share with us a little bit?
So first of all, I was 21 years old, so I was, it was crazy for me. I couldn't believe that, at my age, I was able to work there, that part of my big dream had come true. And so I'll never forget, when I first got in, you have to go for special security clearance, everything. And then you walk into this place, and I was expecting something from like a sci-fi movie, some super beautiful high-tech lab that looks like, 40 years in the future or something. And actually, it looked just like a normal kind of university campus, nothing really fancy. There were deers roaming around, and we got warnings that we should avoid the more elevated areas in the evenings because there might be mountain lions that could attack you. And I'm like, what on earth? But clearly we were more in a spacey environment than on Earth. So yeah, from the outside perspective, it was a bit strange, not what I expected. But then you go into some of the facilities. For example, there's this one lab where, they had the rovers at the time when I was there. They were preparing the Curiosity rover to be sent to Mars, part of the Mars Science Laboratory mission. They had both Spirit and Opportunity, kind of their twins in the lab, and that year Spirit got stuck in rock, so they had recreated the kind of rock pile where Spirit, the rover, was stuck, and they were trying to get it out of there. So that was really amazing, to see these clean rooms and the people working there. The lab where I worked in was super high tech. I've only worked in a couple of other places in the world that had such amazing facilities. And also another kind of funny thing about it was that JPL is built on a fault line, so in an unstable area from a tectonic perspective. And so there were multiple times during my research at JPL that we would have an earthquake. And, when you're working in a biochemical lab, there's all sorts of chemicals and things that hurt you. So I'll never forget, at one point I was mixing some chemicals, and I had some acids and other things all around me. I had this cupboard open above my head with all these glass vials, and then suddenly this big earthquake started. All the glass started coming at me, and I just quickly trying to hold the cupboards in place, but then all these chemicals started spilling on me, and I'm just running around trying to make sure I don't get burnt, which is why lab coats are so important. And so again, you expect it to be something very different, and then comes an earthquake and you could be anywhere and facing similar problems apart the chemicals. But definitely dream come true, and some amazing people work there and have some great memories from those times.
If you're looking to get to take part of High Seas mission, again, ask her the questions, how you can go through the entire procedure, what does it take to get involved, and all the things like that. So, and make sure to share this episode with your friend, that friend who is passionate about space exploration or everything space. Make sure to send this episode toward them. And there's been a few great stories and some great information, again, about analog missions in particular. So make sure to do that. And again, Michaela, again, thanks for kind of quick interview, but I mean, I love the stories. I love your personal passion, and I love the journey, so much dedication and passion for this. And I'm sure the future is very bright for you as far as I see. And I'm sure we're going to see you, in space, being an astronaut and doing those, walks in space sometime in the future for sure.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind. Really appreciate it. And yeah, definitely love to come back. Make sure to ping me again. As you saw, sometimes it's difficult to get a hold of me when I'm on missions, but I would definitely love to come back and talk to you some more.
Awesome. Thanks very much. So again, guys, make sure to pass this episode along to your friends. And as always, I'll see you next time. So until then, keep exploring.
Aloha.